maybe 12 years ago, I was sitting in my office with a client, a guy that I really admired, and he was a second-generation business owner of a relatively small business. And his father was a very successful businessman and a very strong personality, someone who you always knew where he stood, right or wrong, he was going to stand on that square. And his son was almost the polar opposite of that, style-wise or personality-wise. And he was struggling with that, and his father was somewhat critical of the way he was playing out the delegated leadership that he had in that firm. And it was so poignant. I felt like it was a Moses holy ground moment. He looked at me and he said, "Hey, Roger," he said, "is it possible to become a leader with my makeup?" And of course the answer to that is absolutely yes. Will it be harder some days? Sure. Will the path be longer some days? Yes. Will you be in more uncomfortable situations and perhaps shrink back from them on certain days in ways that your father would not have? Yes. So we're all given a certain makeup in life, certain circumstances, some more than less, some more or less, and we grow from those circumstances and from those God-given gifts, and we draw on experiences, good and bad, in our past.
As a leader, there seems to be this balance that we have to strike between confidence and humility. And how do you do that?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. I think too often in life in general, but perhaps in organizational leadership in particular, we tend to set up either or choices. I'm either confident or I'm humble. Those two are not opposites. In fact, humility, Ryan, is one of the most attractive elements of a leader. And if I would refer people to one person in history, as far as that's concerned, I'd have your students, yourself, whomever, look up one single Bible verse, one of my favorite Bible verses. It's a top 10 Old Testament verse for me. And it's actually a verse that's in parentheses in most biblical translations, Numbers 12:3. And it says, "Now the man Moses was the most humble man on the face of the earth." How great is that? This was a man that went face to face with God, that led an entire nation, that pulled an entire nation out of Egypt. And God's word said that he was the most humble man on the face of the earth. Well, my hair stands on end whenever I recount that story. So think about confidence, which Moses clearly had, and humility. And they were there in one person, in my view, the greatest leader in the Old Testament.
We mentioned briefly, and you've obviously brought it into this conversation, how faith plays a role in both your organization and, I'm sure, in the leadership coaching that you do. So as our students are thinking toward leadership roles and embedding their faith and their biblical worldview into those roles, how do you see those things coexisting? How does one inform the other?
Yeah, that's really good. Well, they not only inform each other, one comes before the other. Not every leader, not every successful leader, would even buy into the idea that I was raised with, perhaps you were raised with it, that absolute truth exists. But I would state absolutely that absolute truth exists, and the source of it is our Creator, God, and the greatest wisdom of it is contained in the Bible. And I believe that the two greatest leaders in human history were obviously, number one, Jesus, and number two, the most humble man on the face of the earth, Moses. And they, all they had at the time, they didn't have Patrick Lencioni or John Maxwell. They had the Spirit of God to guide them. And so I think that faithful leaders, Jesus-following leaders, have little excuse not to pursue the best leadership principles because they begin in God's Word. Now, do they extend out beyond that? Of course. But one of my former colleagues, and I think this is one of our beliefs and our belief system on our webpage. You can check me out on that, northgroupconsultants.com. But at any rate, one of those is all truth is God's truth. And I think when you start there, I mean, in a world of complete relativity, the only question is your relativity absolute? So when you get with a full-fledged relativist, you can have that question up your sleeve. But I think when we start with absolute truth, beliefs about who God is, belief that there's a created order to the world, that when we follow it, our lives go better, our leadership expands. But if I would think about the way we play it out at North Group, I don't like the concept of a Christian entity. Like, is North Group Consultants a Christian business? Well, no, people are Christians than little Christs, or we now generally refer to ourselves more specifically as Jesus followers rather than Christians, because that term has gotten broadened out too much. But we don't advertise that on our website. You don't have to dig too deep to infer certain things, and we want those inferred because we like to say that our values should both attract and repel. And I'm quite certain that when people get referred to us or hear the name of our firm, that certain people look at that and they start clicking through the different pages of the website, and they see things that resonate with them, and they call us as a result. I had a call from a gentleman yesterday, I think it was, no indication whatsoever of faith or that he was a Christian, but he had read things on our website that resonated with him. And now, if he becomes a client, we'll have an opportunity. Will I open my Bible and discuss the 4 spiritual laws when he first comes in? No, I won't. But I will have an opportunity to form a relationship with him, and relationship then seeds influence at some point, and we'll see where that leads. By the same token, I'm also quite certain, and actually fine with the fact that I'm sure a number of people have been referred to us over the years, taking a look at it and saying, that's not for me. And I think if you don't have a stand and you don't have values that attract people and repel other people, that they're probably not clear enough and they're probably not strong enough.
The other term that is thrown around, especially in Christian circles, is that of a servant leader. Is that a term that you use at North Group? Is that something that people should strive for, or is that just another kind of leadership?
Yes, yes, and no. So yes, we use that term. Yes, I think it's something people should strive for, and no, I don't think it's another kind of leadership. Well, maybe it is another kind of leadership, but we would view it as the approach that validates you as a as a leader. In its simplest form, all it means is that I focus first on my highest calling, which, if I'm, for instance, in my case, yes, my name is on the firm, we named it after me and all this silly stuff, but it's an entity. It needs to be served by people. And so I'm serving that entity in my role as founder and CEO. If I'm waking up in the morning thinking about what Roger wants to get out of things today, what favors me, or even how the outcomes of the organization can advance my pursuits, I'm really abandoning my leadership position. I'm abandoning the idea that I'm going to positively influence people towards shared outcomes, because that's not a shared outcome. That's a singular outcome. So the whole idea of servant leadership is that I am focused on the highest order to which I am called. And it also helps me when we get into, I'll give you an example. Okay, to give you an example?
Absolutely, I love
when
examples.
I get into a challenging situation with an employee, perhaps, who is not fully carrying out their job responsibilities, maybe a little short of competent, or perhaps they're behaving in ways that are not consistent with our value set. All of us are challenged by these situations at some point in our life. And only when we start thinking about what the organization is called to, can I properly put into play how I need to deal with that individual situation? Because all kinds of things. I got a call, I think it was just yesterday, from one of my clients. He started talking about an underperforming employee, and then rightly added in that employee was going through some very difficult times on a personal level, running into some some physical problems, had some extended family issues, and are they perhaps reasons why that person was falling short of an acceptable level of performance? Yes. Can I let that go on forever because of my empathy for that person? No, because I would be abandoning a higher call. Do I have a calling to serve that person? Absolutely. Is it as high a calling as serving the team that that person serves on or the organization that that team serves? No, it's not. I've got to think about that at the highest level. And so many times, what I'm called to do on behalf of the organization is at odds with what I want to do for myself, because I don't want to deal with a situation that complicated. Mm-hmm. I just don't. I don't want to put on probation or terminate someone who is underperforming in the organization, but whose personal life I will make even more difficult by that employment decision. Mm-hmm. But I need to raise something else up to a higher standard. And I think that's the essence of servant leadership, is can I recognize and am I willing to serve the highest mission to which I am called? Mm.
Yeah, that's great, and really difficult to walk through situations like that. Thinking through what is the thing that needs to be done to serve the greater good of the organization and the people within it that will affect one person negatively, or even you as a leader, because if it comes down to it, and really the best thing is to remove that person mm-hmm. from their role, mm-hmm. you now have a vacuum that needs to be filled.
You do.
That's more work for you to do.
You, or
right.
perhaps even more work for their staff or
right.
other people around them. You're looking at you and say, dude, what are you doing?
Yep.
Well, serving the higher good, hopefully, but on our way to there, things often get more difficult before they get better. Mm-hmm. And then that calls on the trust level that the organization has or the individuals have in that leader. And of course, I want to add, I think you know this already, but perhaps others watching it might be interested in this. When we think of trust, I think our default position is to think of character-based trust. Mm. So, is this person going to lie to me, or are they a person of integrity? Can I trust their word? And that's baseline trust. But trust in organizations of all kinds is also competence-based trust. We think of it in 3 C's: character, competence, and commitment. Competence-based trust is, can they do this job that we're asking them to do? Have I given them enough training? Do they have the academic background to think this through? Do they have the perspective? All those sorts of things. So I would trust you very highly from your character standpoint, but I'm probably not going to put you with one of my clients tomorrow, because we haven't talked through all the competence-based things that it would take for Ryan to become a North Group consultant. That very likely could work out, given what I know about you, but I don't trust you to do that tomorrow.
Right.
And then there's a commitment-based consultant, element to trust as well, that we really need to think through is, does this person have the staying power? And this was a cornerstone of how we raised our children, which is when you make a commitment, you are rarely going to know all of the elements of that commitment. And at some point, if that commitment has any ballast, any weight to it, you will get to a point and say, why did I make this decision? I would love to bail out. And that's the point where character is defined, when my commitment is challenged. When I'm called into a not-for-profit organization, I think this would be fine. I can go to a board meeting 2 times a month, and the next thing you find yourself in is a very difficult situation that calls for all the energy and experience you've ever had in leadership to get the organization through. And that's where trust-based character kicks in. I may have the character and I may have the competence, but I need the commitment too to see it to the end. So anyway, it was a cornerstone of the way we raised our children, is when you make a commitment, you're gone to the end of the season, no matter if you're sitting at the end of the bench.
Yeah.
And if they tell you need to play 3rd violin when you really wanted to play 1st violin, you're going to play 3rd violin.
Mm-hmm. Well, Roger, I thank you for your time.
Thanks, Ryan. It was a privilege.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.